So before I start with Stephen's bio and his introduction and stuff, I just wanted to say that I got interested in his work because he kept like showing up everywhere I was. Like he was at the he was like the I was talking to him. He was at the graduate center. He was like the first person I sat next to in a class at the graduate center in like Wayne Kestemount's class. I sat down and there he was. And then I started hearing his name frequently. I would read interviews and people would say, you know, whose work do you like? And, you know, like Brian Blanchfield, whose work I really admire, said, I'm blown away by Steve. I was like, oh, that guy again? And so he just kept coming up, and I started to kind of follow him on the internet, which is very easy to do. And so that's kind of, I think that actually has something to do with the sort of formal qualities of his work. And so, yeah. So what I find and the quality of his writing that I want to focus on is this creep or spreading like a vine, or like they say, a route and not a root. Slang spreads this way, creepingly, as do accents, when through the lightest kinds of touch, we are overtaken by lilting and dropping and stress. Steve's poems are so sensitive to the ways in which we occupy space and accidentally touch and recoil and seed, just as much as they seize and twist back the borders of AMURKA and MESSICKO. So they are whipped up, the borders and the people who people the poems. Steve is present at the edge of the text at all times, outlining its geography and its typography. I can feel him at the border of the text while I'm reading, looking at me. The texts are pervaded by his fierce, rebuilding intelligence. The loneliness of being fleet of forked tongue. This writing echoes experimental American poetries of place, hot, dry, and roughneck. Here is Dorn's Dead Horse, but there are Pound's glyphic dialogues with the farthest reaches, only to grind that condition into the dust of the many words it cannot properly pronounce. They spread unstoppably, these poems. They are oncoming. They overflow any single tradition and dismiss the generic to become lyric and visionary and polemic, what he calls neo-Baroque Chicano experimentalism. Here's your bio. Stephen Alvarez is an assistant professor of writing, rhetoric, and digital studies at the University of Kentucky. He's the author of the Pocho Codex and the Chicano Genome, both published by editorial Paroxysmo. Read more of his work at www.stephenpaulalvarez.com. Please welcome Stephen Alvarez to the Poetry Project.
First off, I just want to thank the Poetry Project for allowing me to come back, get away from old Kentucky. Happy to be here. I lived here for 7 years. I would say definitely New York City. A lot of good friends here, familiar faces. And tonight I have some very important people who have never seen me read before, so I'm very happy. Mis suegros, Jairo and Gloria, my mother-in-law and my father-in-law. So I'm very happy they could be here. So I'm going to read a little bit from a chapbook, which should be published very soon by Seven Kitchens Press, called 6 Poems from the Codex Mohauticus. Of course, a Mohau is a slang term for wetback. I'm also going to read a few poems from the Chicano Genome. Here it is. And then I have a special treat from a poem from a young man in Lexington, Kentucky, an undocumented young man who wrote a poem, and then I'll mention this in a few minutes here. So I got 25 minutes. I'm going to take this off and watch the clock. I don't want to distract you with my bling. All right. It happens. All right. So my poems, Guillermo, very beautiful. I was very touched by your poetry. My poems are not as touching. In fact, maybe they're offensive, which is fine, it's good for me. I do love to play with accents, and I do love to write in Spanglish. My background, I'm Mexican-American. English was my first language. Spanish was punished out of my family in Arizona. Literally, my father used to get the stick. And my parents grew up saying, we will always speak English, English only. So when I went to college is when I really started getting involved with my Mexican culture and trying to learn. And, ahorita, I'm still learning a little bit of Spanish. So the first poem I will read is called 2007, Fifth Son, Our Present. Of human sacrifice and sacrificial descent into hell, legit copy, MS 47158H-2, paper, ink draft, November. Here in Mexico, we find Charlie Chastateas in Mictlan, after escaping the treachery of creamy sunlit Xochitl Flores, who said to our night goodbye after his quote-unquote great refusal. And after 13 months after that rainy Tuesday, our fair Xochitl threw him down and came kissy kiss kiss face down upon him post Vegas, 13 months later tracking him to Alaska and murdering him, devouring him, and ripping open his pecho, que pachanga, scratching the hell his legs and arms and screaming, Santiago, Santiago, and dispatching him thoroughly, even despite otra vez his fair swordplay. She, blackening his slowing heart with copal smoke, wrapped in limp nopales. And now, first stop here in death's abode, Charlie finds himself presented with one of La Muerte's jovencita emissary agents, one of the four, Lazadeo, Guatan, Guashka, Lawi, or Chape, he can't determine. And looking good for this pink pearl of perfection appears painful. Her hair striped agate, clotted with blood into braids, never combed or parted, and her chocolato eyes of pure stars, make no mistake, freeze to the bone. And have the suns sing, and they sing, rain, rain. And she swells him with embalmed songs, and up above, sagging moon, thick and pregnant, then she says, No temas donde vayas, que has de morir, donde debes, powerfully sacred. And when it fills our world like rails of luz through and through. And, hasta que tome la píldora, no se me quitó el olor. And her florid speech, spoken to no one in particular mind, Charlie hadn't sufficient Spanish to do with her anyway, and no, and egad, that smell, and behold, Charlie Chastateas truchas, her name, stinks, sudden overwhelming stench, more than carrion in Tucson in July, more than dead salmon filling dry creek beds in Alaska in August, and he sickens, and groans, folds, and darkness twisting him like a river weighing him down. And he contemplates again to go, yeah, again, to leave his hated and oh so heated Aslan, which he never does, claro, but he continues on, pulling himself along, dragging along some white mud, and on, passing this jovencita, voicing one guttural, grassy ass, and smiling, and suddenly he strolls further in his too despondent Baroque hallucination MacLevince until he reaches that forested juncture, and these cosmic trees, fat and fur-barked with sky branches, and he sits beneath one shadow which shines specks of stars and finds his smoking mirror, gazes at his face, and this mirror cracks, and his face wrinkles, and he reflects himself, puro viejo, face like a battered stone, and so he instantly sleeps, later wakes in his dream, and he walks, gritos de dolores sounding in his ears, death de gachupinas, and so he squats on a slab of unrefined copper to rest, his hands leaning on his forelump, and yonder, Aslan shining in the distance, he looking down from some height in space-time, and as for space, he's there where his focus handles, which as he considers, affects tears to rush into his gloomy eyes. Cold sobs cut his throat. Oh, constructed tears, of smeared centuries gone, dripping down his face and sorrowfully falling to stone and piercing his heart. And as he wipes his face, shadows linger where his hands rest. And as he wakes into another dream, who else but one-armed Alvaro Obregón appears. And C looks up, banners reading imposition, resistance, adaptation, transformation. Sound concepts way, Obre says, where you gone? And immediately Charlie responds, to a place of red daylight to find some wisdom. Says Obregón, his mouth full of frozen blood. And Charlie wakes again. And again, Obregón, though this time missing opposite arm. Red daylight? Know it? Don't know, says Obri, but have a plug of this pulcaso just for you. Well, I won't say no. And he sips that brew from a yellow popote, sweet wine and sweeter still yet, and instantly, bien pedo, perfectamente drunk, falls, faints on calle and dreams, sleeps, snores echo for miles in these canyons, and he wakes, dreams of waking, finds only silence, pure. An empty, trusted town of concrete and rebar, a new peak between Popocatépetl and Iztaccíhuatl, and snow slowly descends, face white mud-caked and surrounded by carcasses of books, pages lost among the dead, and that weight oppresses him, so he weeps for these books, then sings, and his tears again endlessly cold, and long sighs issue deep from his guts until he sleeps, and he wakes, or dreams, to a beach, and there a hulk of serpents formed into a raft, and directly reaches into his pocket and produces his MTA Metro card, which he promptly presents to the largest snake's mouth, which it sucks, and it slides an entry for Charlie, and he boards, and he sails into that diamond ocean, the boat gliding on burning waters into that land of red daylight, on the rim of the great sea, and his face reflects an ocean. So, I probably should mention a few things. This character, Charlie, I have two books. They're both novels in verse. Charlie Chastetez is my hero. He's like the Chicano Stephen Dedalus, I call him. We all, every culture needs a Stephen Dedalus, I reckon. And I just said I reckon. Sorry about that, but Kentucky. So I'm going to read another poem about Charlie. This poem won an award in 2008. It's one of the poems of Times Square. First time I ever did a reading, so I got to do my first reading in Times Square. Pretty gangster. And basically, it was a poem about Charlie trying to find a place to dump the ashes of his tío, or his uncle, in Times Square. So I'll read this. And this is titled 2007, Fifth Son, Our Present. And so Tío Pancho and Charlie penetrated Manhattan, deep, sloppy July humidity tangling them until Times Square, as Tío used to say, though he'd never been. And so his Sinaloan destiny linked with web to this eastern place. And so Charlie Chastetez would dump his Tío ashes wherever he thought best, here in Times Square. Charlie looked down at his Tío's new shell, then he said, Pero oye, listen, oye, and look, Tío, la luz, said Charlie to his Tío, whom he toted in black plastic sack cinched at top. And how long and hidden Tío in his dreams followed clinking cloud, rolling curtains, gas green neon billowing, crowd furrowed, strange brows. Sure, mighty torrent, sure as its might, crowd. And calmate, Pancho, hush your thunder, said Charlie, clearly speaking his Tío. Shun what's common and mean. 6,982,488 lights flashing fury thought bulbs, and another 6,982,488 and noise. And his Tío from beyond, para el tiempo to boot these lines, cosmos, black blanket stars, speckled planets, nebulae, constellations of sun. Lend your ears, thought Charlie to the folks exiting planet Hollywood, and to some beautiful 50-foot tall, pouty-lipped white young man, or maybe woman. Oh, Tío, away, along, alone on 42, Charlie walking solo west with his Tío's ashes in his sack. Plastic, guachale, walking Tío's ashes north past Swatch, hug sidewise, oh, servicio, here, Tío, here, time's money, Tío. Charlie said to his uncle's ashes, sack cinched, time y movement in Ethiopia. Time metaphors, said Charlie to his uncle's ashes, of movement don't exist. Well, buckle no arrow, buckle no fleeting, y sense. And Charlie Chastetez reckoned here in Nueva York, lights and folks who asked C for money and asked B2B, what's in that bag, boss? And can I get some? And C, no. Es mi tío en esta bolsa. Basta! Y no forever. Sus Sinaloan primos no tienen su papá, not now nor forever. Charlie, and the body just disappears. Becomes dirt, dirt, dirt. Well, his ashes anyway. Never to have visited Times Square with blood mixed with his flesh. Oh, Tío, dead, dead, dead. First line is a bat in political matters. Racist, como Ezra Pound, racist tío, fearful tío, hatred, hard-hearted contra women, Jews, homosexuals, Puerto Ricans, evil tío, different worlds really, refracted big time. And he wanted Times Square? No manches! He died from self-hatred, self-pity, self-dread, all these nights. Charlie looked up, always electric day here in this place. Charlie needed a dark place, and he eyed a green flower pot, sweat in his eyes, pot over yonder, and said to the box, there are two things in this dirty, dirty world. Up he looked at groups of students, chaperoned by working-class folk from Wax Museum, J-Lo. Second, visible through the window, two things, brute facts and social facts. Deal, brute facts exist without man. Charlie, still speaking to cinched bag, but objects in relation to time after the lantern, yard, loss of God, absence of meaning, and Charlie speaking faster, rambling, rabble row, space without time, repetition instead, cyclical time. Hello, Quetzalcoatl, I order you, universe, Times Square, stop! And nothing, nothing. Look, Dio. Here he spoke to the ashes in the box. Shells. Okay. So, I know, I get really excited with that one. That was a fun poem. Let's see, I think I got some time. All right, so then I'm going to read a few others. I was really flattered that Simone mentioned, well, Ezra Pound for one, but you also said Dorn. And this poem that I'm going to read now is very much inspired by Ed Dorn. And this one is called Now Ninos, and this will appear in the next issue of Drunken Boat, which is dedicated to Libro Traficante, which is basically poets bringing books to Arizona that have been banned by the legislature. Basically, books for Mexican-American students who want to read about their own history, but it's anti-American, so to speak. So this poem is largely inspired also by my Arizona upbringing, and it's called Now Ninos. MS Codex Mahauticus, legit copy, paper, ink, draft. That great American prophet, patriot, with colors I ain't ever gonna run, bleeding stripes and stars, barbacoa, red meat eating freedom, star loving, pickup truck driving prophecies transnationally. Oh, senior citizen Henry with borders, operator gatekeeper himself, our gendered American citizen from way on right, not waiting 1 minute, man, for questions about all them beaners making babies and filling classrooms with their primitive slanguage, and speaking of that, bringing in lice and vermin and venereal diseases from that land of tortillas to grease our lovely America with fatty carnitas and slimy corn husk meat cakes, invading our America, them goddamn animals living in trailers, 65, 70 aliens in every single one, and thus taking upon himself, old senior citizen Henry, us with additional patriots like himself, always, always, always urge them brownie drones on back yonder to their Queen Calavera, or whoever, back into that dysfunctional haven of narcos and death they have always ran from. And oh, senior citizen Henry, of impeccable personified smoothness and slender veiny white glove encased hands and enormous, nay, vast cultural geometry, complex and awkwardly dignified behind his pale-faced, one vast, distinctly American face between here and his historic formerly, reading to school kids at Francisco Kino Elementary in Tombstone, Aztlan. Turns the next page into his next picture book, Down from America, Back to Castislandia, young reader version of his equally as childish adult study, Who Are They? The Greasing of America's National Identity. Invited by his teacher wifey, Esther, to read to these chamacos, mostly brown in shape and texture, but American in location. And looking at him all sitting there all brown and big-eyed, looking up at senior citizen, I tell you, you'd have split your Levi's and dropped bears if you'd have seen it. Lo que pasa es. Henry held up the self-published picture book, and old racista Henry read, and one day some beaner son of a shameless squaw, Glyph, a mustachio Diodaco, decides to try his luck against El Rio Bravo, but first prays to his Sainto, some masked luchador wrestler named San Evaviche, and after lighting 4 candles, walks close on his dry Mexican land, and he ain't been away from this same spot but for 2 weeks, and he's waiting with his garbage bag containing his clothes and his cacahuates, tortillas and energy drink, and out some gringo hero pops up in front of him. Glyph, Uncle Sam with thick Cristalino frontier pointed finger. Chingao, says that Pilato con grasa. And Sammy, our Sammy, that American hero, who of course that beaner wouldn't know, says, hey there, Mr. Mojito. Hello, ain't seen you for a spell. Where you been? Well, this Pepper Belly says something Mexican. And Dio Sam says somehow knowing that wet nodding yonder, right up on that there dry land, tierra firma, back on over into Madre land. Glyph. Now, where's that? Dark wasteland, contrasted with green lushness. Say, compadre, ain't it wet up there on that dry land you descend from, amigo? Is it cool and refreshing there? Does it have lakes with waves and ripples and fish? Can't you survive in it? And just then his gabacho, retired professor friend, pops up too. Some sunbird from up near Twin Cities. His RV plugging over yonder mesquite reality court television shows talking justice. And this fast-talking gabacho dedicating 30 days to defend America like a true patriot, sacrificing his own time to defend America's desert wasteland border. And this one, Dr. Birote, Glyph, Yankee blowhard blofero, sporting tweed blazer with elbow patches. Dr. Birote says, this dry land you descend from is imaginary, Paco Taco. One completely non-existent imaginary thing. Nothing real at all, says this one. Mexico makes this non-metaphysical nation wretch. So swim on back, lest you want this real leather American size 10 straight up your culo. Glyph, size 10, School of the Americas issued red, white, blue combat boots. Chingao. ¿Quién es este güey? One Buki in the back, calling the ghost of Cortés, Gregorio Cortés. Please, please, go on, please. In unison, kids. So sorry, senores, as that cockroach crawls back into that shit pile he came from. Here, let me hold this illustration high so you all can see real nice what Mexico looks like. Glyph, brown babies with bulging hunger bellies and shacks walled with newspaper. Now, where was I? Oh yes, that's right. Professor Barote to Uncle Sam. Our duty, our American duty, our never-ending battle to secure America's borders and to reveal to all the third world Paco Tacos those real aspects of their putrid homeland's inferiorities relative to American wealth, sweetness, goodness, exceptionalism. And our kind eyes shining so clear, and how dare you challenge our national sovereignty and our rule of law, brownies? Glyph, walls, and still more walls, concrete walls, and razor wire. And our Uncle Sam smugly and with outstretched hand shakes Professor Bridote's extended ring finger and says, listen closely, niños. He says, well, they say eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. They say that. And they say this America's being in time, this American chromatope's suffering from invasive dirty beaners from down on southward, lugging northward babies. They try to anchor to this land, spicking backwards language and bringing over that plain old inferior Indian blood. Brown bastards, quesadilla eating, greasy-headed, filthy drug-smuggling mules, goddamn frijoleros. Glyph, La Señora Guadalupe, with 5 soiled chewies at her unsandaled feet. Now let me ask you one question, kiddies. Be honest, let me ask you. How can an American of 300 million absorb 100 million poor, uneducated, Spanish spick and wets and still be American? Answer that. Go ask your padres and see what they say. And you smarty pats. Yeah, you in the back there. You with those American subsidized glasses. There in the back. Yeah, do. Quit crying. And los niños. Silence. I argue in my controversial Who Are They that your arrival in America from 1970 to 2000 threatens our American core of identitas and culture because you don't speak English. You stick to your enclaves and you're like spick and spicks, quick crying. You don't want to assimilate. You want to make babies. You want me to remake my life into some Americano dream? Bullshit. There's only one American dream. My dream. Sniff. Sniff. What, you ain't got nothing to say? That's what I thought. Thank you for your time and heart your freedom or get your ass out. And how about some applause for our special guest class? Yeah, so that one's going to be coming up. People talking country, pretty happy. let's see, I think I have time for a couple more. Oh, I don't know if I should, yeah, okay. So this is a cowboy poem. And this is pretty gangster as well. I'll finish with this one actually, and I'll just do one more after this, a short one in Spanish. And I'll read part of this one because it's a little bit long. My poems, I try to get them to tell stories. And the stories sometimes weave in and out of Mesoamerican mythology, and also, as you can tell, I like to play with accents. It's good times for me. Okay, so this one begins. Look, hoss, see him there across, that dusted yellow creosote dandy and prissy, and as he sloshes his Sinaloan sombrero at a jack-deuce angle over his off ear, his spurs catch sun's glint, shine naked as a branding iron, since he swaggers to all dressed up like a sore wrist, looking like a dime novel on a spree, sporting one of them black suits, what with no front, just a little windbreak down on back, a red silk neckerchief over one starry fringed buckskin shirt, and them sealskin chaparajos and rigid yellow ostrich flesh boots. Sure enough made this one look like a regular old mail order catalog a la chingada. Puro vaquero norteño, able to face any electric slide or achy breaky corazon. This cowboy, living la vida cruda, for we could smell him before he stepped in, rancid with that brindle taste in his hot mouth, a full-grown case of booze blind. Breath strong enough to crack a mirror, from hooching that tarantula juice strong enough to draw blood blisters on a rawhide boot yesterday, and deep into yesternighty, sipping silver bullets and wildcat and mesquite tree shade all daylight for some 7 hours, and after sunset, he bow-legged on over yonder honky-tonk after kicking a few cars and napping in a bank parking lot, to inoculate himself for another 9 and night dark and to nurse himself from all the multiplicities of snakebite. And after stumbling back cured to the rancho, mostly drunker than a bile owl, and hell if he'd ever seen Borat's Blind, he woke roadside, just north a Triple T restaurant and gas, face covered with ants, red throbbing skin, next to a yucca and barbed wire, and lo, a headache so big it wouldn't fit into a hoss corral. Dunn woke up cussing screeches in his brains with his head, feeling big enough to eat hay with hosses in Montana. And he stood his best, crawled himself up, dusted off, opened and shut his eyes, and he said, chingado. And he spotted his sombrero atop the arm of a transplanted 12-foot saguaro. He looked a little something like a would-be Jesus Malverde, with them ostrich boots all charred up to the nines, but with less sense enough to spit downwind, says Este Way, saloon patron number 1. And as C steps further into this bar with reclaimed flamingo feathered sombrero, tilted still eyes take him in. And as he bowlegs it on up because they know provoking tipsy poet likes, more dangerous than kicking a loaded polecat, they say nothing. What, again, with those yellow cowboy boots clacking on cobblestones and he wobbling on over direct from just north a Triple T restaurant and gas, straight into here, Death's Rodeo. And let be known, in this saloon, one structure of time gets recursive because Charlie Chastateas had been on in here before now, and right on through them swinging doors he sits for maybe the 900th time in his life, in both Mexico and America, and right now between both in Aztlan, straight on through into dusty borderland, sunlight, stomach-wrenching, and he, damn cursed and recursively, cursed, and he thinks, and of all the cantinas in this wide Aztlan, because this way steps into this one with a pocket-faced potholes, cacarazo more profound than Grande Cañon, and squarish eye, and even squarer pupil, prominent Roman nose, and those central incisors of his upper jaw filed to shape squat stones, and fangs projecting from his mouth's corners, which you might call on the boundaries of humanity, a regular bucknun for looks, and bigger carajo como el pinche machete. Couldn't hide no more than a hill, and Pobre Charlie fell into Death's Cantina here in Gila Bend, Aztlan, a town where most doors swing both ways. Town so tough all the hoot owls sing bass of sun, sand, sun, and blisters, and scarred heat enough to addle the old thinker box into a ruckus of apparitions. And here at the prophetically ominous and ordinary Cantina Aquí Estoy Esperando, another temple of Mexican virility, most especially so, and Charlie, again, bien pedo, still lit like a honky-tonk on Saturday night, as he in fact had honky-tonk for some 9 hours last night. Saturday Norteño night at Club Estadio Scandaloso on South 6th in Tucson, where the imagination is sufficient to sculpt bubbling shades of bottles tipped his way, muy muchos times, and each colder than the last. And Charlie now, pues, not exactly looking like first prize at a bull show, but with Chicano spur rowels as big as soup plates, stumbles into Aquí estoy esperando, spitting pretty something about ni más ni menos de tres amigos, and para todo mal mezcal, and receiving no response from the bartender, with wax stashes, looking like a monocled albondiga con pies, who continues to shine a pint glass and sea-assed and reaffirmed tone. Oye, hablas Chinglish way or no? Jukebox, singing, and she was Mex, and I gringo, and so it could not be. No response. And Charlie knows bad things will be a-going down. What in 13 heaven is this, Charlie thinks? What in 13 heaven is this, Charlie asks. And as he does, hiccup, so his identity thickens for jukebox strum. 'Cause she loved me in Mexican, and I truly loved her all in green. And I'm a-singing to you, stranger. She was Mex and I a gringo, and so it could not be. Listen here, citizen, says C. Hear that song? I got something to say about that. Good. Albarnica. What you want, hombre? Me first, says this size 911. Me first, vaquero, for you tread a fence. That feller singing, communicating with me and his lady about miscommunicating with same said lady. Lordy, I tell you what, that feller singing about singing and doing it in English. And that's all I need, so look at here, partner. Your message here, you're speaking to me in anything but Arizona English is about as useless as setting a milk bucket beneath a bull. What I want to draw from this moment's my business, compadre, drawing from some deep border stuff. Hear me and speak like me, for speaking corrects means your livelihood and that of your children. Let me speak of love, good sir, says Charlie, and he pulls up a nice seat. And El Bondiga slides a tumbler of rocky tequila, strong enough to kill a goat. And Charlie says, escuchen, güeyes. Jukebox, strum, strum, strum. Don't be afraid of what you learn. Regular Mexican angel was she, and I a pinche gringo cabron, and so and see, or more couldn't be. Now you hear that, nods? His trump. This trumps that small stuff, compadre, because poets know matters of the heart, no conocen tongues. Bueno, hiccup, perdon, well, how universal you can judge. She left me all this dough, and she from down yonder someplace without air conditioners. Hot, dry, unpaved roads, and where folks wear huaraches and live with their chickens inside their adobe homes afraid of narcos. Sí, es la verdad, says Albarnica, el sur. And so she left me all this plata to make my life, and I never thanked her because she died. Cursed, really, because she loved this way. And I think I'm going to stop there. I'll tell you that's about halfway. If you want to find out more, got to buy the book. All right. So I'm going to finish up with one more, and I mentioned this. This was my department. I'm not a creative writer per se. I'm more a rhetorician. I study composition and rhetoric. My research in New York City focused on Mexican immigrants in the South Bronx, particularly the way monolingual parents found ways and resources to assist their children with English homework. Right? So when I got to Kentucky, I was also interested to find out more about the Mexican population. So I live in Lexington. There is a barrio called Mexington. Okay. So when I went to Mexington, I met a few folks, and I met a small club started by Latino students at a high school. I was at the Deferred Action, which is DACA, which is not quite the DREAM Act, but a step in the right direction. And I met a lot of these young folks who undocumented, and they want to go to college. And I realized they have powerful stories, so I offered to do some creative writing workshops with them once a week. The result was this book, which we're selling for $10. It's available on Amazon. And we're doing this partly because the proceeds will go for scholarships for the students who contributed, because as I mentioned, they are undocumented. So I'm going to read a poem from my compadre, Edson Gonzalez. Está en español, permite. And it's called Hola, and I'll finish with this. Los días son largos, y sin ti son más. Cuento cada hora, cada minuto, cada segundo, para que te pueda decir hola. Aunque solo te veo y no me atrevo a decirte hola. Me siento el hombre más feliz, aunque solo he visto hermoso cabello. Así como soy el hombre más feliz también, soy el hombre más triste, porque solo te vi y no te dije hola. Pero siempre hay una nueva oportunidad mañana para decir hola. Pero tal vez mañana ya sea muy tarde, y andes con otra persona y que se atrevió a decirte hola. Así que hoy iré hacia ti, a hacer que te voltees y decirte hola. Así mañana ya no sea muy tarde para decir hola. Thank you.